You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week, we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by Christopher Carazas, a Paraguayan American writer whose journey spans continents, cultures, and a lifetime of resilience. Diagnosed as autistic in adulthood, Christopher has navigated the challenges of masking, emotional recovery, and finding his voice after years of silence. His memoir, Now That I'm Still Here, shares a powerful story of survival and hope. Today, we'll discuss his experiences, the healing power of storytelling, and how to foster inclusion. Welcome to the podcast, Christopher Carazas.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have this conversation today because I think that your story and your journey is something that is extremely unique, but also it's the storytelling aspect to the way that you approach things. I think that our audience is going to love. But before we get there, I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey to discovering your autism diagnosis and maybe how it's shaped your views right now.
That's an interesting question. So I always felt a little different from everyone else. When I was a kid, it got chalked up to having ADHD. So I grew up overseas most of my life, and then when there was that abrupt change of saying hey Chris, we're moving to Ecuador in a couple days, or we're moving to Ghana. Right after that, there was this huge sense of unregulated undisruption, right? Or disruption, I should say, where it seemed like my world blew up whenever there was these changes, and I didn't know why. I got better at managing it, but I would do things like I bit a cow once. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I was just angry and didn't know why I was angry. But it was once I got diagnosed, it was because my structure had changed. My deep sense of routine changed seemingly overnight. But at the time, my family was like, "Oh, he's just being a little kid with ADHD." And eventually, I learned to manage it and so I later learned that the term was masking. That's exactly what I was doing. And I called that internal dialogue of masking the passenger in my book. It's that voice that's stay silent, don't let them see you crack, and just watch and observe and mirror everybody, and so that you can appear normal. I learned that innately growing up, and that was my guiding voice through high school, through college. And I had a otherwise unremarkable life. I did everything that you were supposed to. I had girlfriends. I played sports. I played guitar. Went to college. Got a job. Got married. Bought a house. All that was normal. Or normal milestones in air quotes, right? But I still felt different. Why I never understood why certain lights bothered me, or certain sounds, or the one that drives me. There's gonna asterisk. I love kids. I love other people's kids. I don't have any of my own, but I always thought it was weird why I was so nervous around kids. It was from the picture of their voice to just I would get anxiety because they were unpredictable. Yep. And they're just being kids. It's normal, but I didn't. It wasn't until I got diagnosed with autism where that clicked too. You're just having sensory issues, bro. That's what's making you nervous. It's not the kid itself, right? And when I got diagnosed at 35, after years of getting pushed to get diagnosed, I learned more. I initially resisted getting tested because my ignorant concept of autism at the time was the movie The Rain Man, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, that's one end of the spectrum. That's a severe case, but I didn't know that there was another end of the spectrum where, there's people like me that were functional, uh, in loosely functional, right? Um, but as when I got diagnosed, I started to find a language for all these things and of what I was naturally doing,
Yeah.
masking and the sensory overload and the coping mechanisms that I had just learned uh, that I developed just naturally. But at the same time, I experienced deep psychological abuse. It came with deep sense of freedom to this, right? My my spouse at the time, or I was in a relationship where I was told that my autism made me less worthy to be in that relationship.
Mm.
That the world would be better off without me because I'm on the spectrum, and it was a and it was a slow erosion over years, nearly being told daily that this. So
Yeah.
when you hear those things, you on repeat, you start to believe it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I did. I believe, I walked out of that relationship in 2024 after surviving two attempts, and I sought I sought and continue to be in psychiatric treatment. I do therapy. I was in a hospital for a month after I walked out of that relationship, and I ended up writing. I started to write as a confessional um, to a girlfriend I had of why I was so difficult to love, why I was so resistant to
Mm-hmm.
her kindness. And when she got sick, that's I started to why I wanted her to know why.
Yeah.
She didn't know the full extent, and then she ended up passing away last April. So she
Sorry.
didn't get enough to she didn't live enough to hear the end of the story. But I ended up finishing my book, chronicling the autism, growing up autistic, the abuse, and the journey after that of
Mm-hmm.
recovery and healing. Um, because my hope is never to send out the pitchforks. It's more of along the lines of saying, like, here's my story. There are other people like me out there, and there is hope beyond the first, that there is hope for us neurodivergent people to actually be successful and have tools to be successful. But if you find yourself in a situation where we've been psychologically abused or taken advantage of, there is hope. You just have to take steps to advocate for yourself.
And the strength that you have to share your story, as much as it might be powerful for neurodivergence, it sounds like it's extremely powerful for you personally, but it should also be something that can be taken away by neurotypical people to help them become better better at understanding the world around them, and not just focusing on one thought pattern being correct or one way of living being the appropriate way. But I'd love to
Right.
go backwards because it sounds like over time you became almost like a master masker,
Yeah.
just because you had to. Is that going through different cultural experiences? I feel like when I did that during some of my work, is that I had to mask parts of me depending on which culture I was in, is that I had to figure out how do I become a part of this? And then also with autism, it's okay, well, now how do I mask to be able to help society accept me versus being myself and allowing society to really see and value me as a person? And I think those are hard things to do. But tell me about kind of the masking in general. When you were growing up, and you obviously were autistic at that time as well, and your thought patterns weren't always necessarily the same, especially it sounds like with dysregulation, where things might be extremely hard with change and disruption. How did you navigate some of that?
I, when I wasn't able to control my or when became like severely dysregulated, I was like 5 or 6. It sounded like I don't remember much of what I did, like biting the cow. I don't remember that, right? Or there was another moment of uh, I found out that we were gonna move yet again, and I stuck my uh, key in the key socket and zapped
Hmm.
myself across the room because that felt like torture, right?
Hmm.
But I didn't. I remember feeling those things, but as I as I became older, I still felt, I like inside me, I was like severely this like whenever my things would change or whenever or my routine would change in terms of a new move, it wasn't that difficult because and somehow I remember making that mind shift that this is normal. This is part of the routine, and that's how
Hmm.
it can, that's this is the routine of my life. And so I did things like negotiate with my own nervous system that way, and which is either a good or bad thing. I don't know, but um, it's it's one of the things that I did to self-regulate. Where when I became more socially aware of what was socially acceptable, I would have internal conversations with myself like, hey, you know, these people don't have this, so fake it till you make it. That
Hmm.
was that was and that's how I kind of started to self-regulate, is trying to just mirror people. Now, it was often easier overseas, because I think with us, I'm sure you're familiar with the term third culture kids, but for those that aren't familiar with that term, is it's people like me who grew up outside of their parents' cultures, um, and so because I grew up in international schools most of my life up until for my freshman year, I found that they were a lot more forgiving to any weirdness.
Hmm.
So I didn't have to work too hard to self-regulate, because in some sense everyone was a little stressed from having just moved or just about to move.
Yeah.
Uh, but I found it harder to self-regulate here in the U.S. because I moved to a small town here in Massachusetts. Everyone seemed to know each other from when they were little kids, and it was a lot more judge. I felt like it was a lot more judgmental, and I had never been in an environment where crowded hallways and slamming lockers and gym class inside. So
Hmm.
so it was a different kind of sensory overload that I didn't know how to manage or ever experience. But so I did what I did best: suppress and just deal with it, right?
Hmm.
And but it was and that was a lot of it, that internal monologuing with my dark passenger, uh, and I would remind myself, like, don't let them see you break, because then they'll make fun of you again. So it was a lot of that repression, and I often felt exhausted afterwards because
Hmm.
when I got home, because it was when your nervous system is always taxed, your body ultimately pays the price.
Absolutely. And I guess I would look at it as almost like trying to immerse yourself into a homogeneous culture. which might
Mhm.
be that situation in Massachusetts where you came in, everybody grew up together, a lot of their shared experiences were the same, and you're trying to be able to kind of step into that. It's almost like you have to create like this shield, this barrier in order to be accepted. Whereas in the other situation, being in international schools, it's almost like diversity was celebrated. So
Yeah.
it was where, hey, you know what? I want to know the experiences of a wide range of people. So I'm more than willing to stop, listen, understand a perspective. Is that, I mean, if you were to paint like I guess, an ideal kind of cultural environment for us to be able to kind of strive towards? Would it be one where it's saying, hey, everybody is going to be different culturally, and your culture could be your identity, it could be neurodivergent, but everybody is different. We should explore that. We should embrace that, and we should celebrate some of these things.
It's I'm gonna is and mind you, it's gonna be a biased answer. It because that's the environment I've been most comfortable operating under. After high school, I went and studied overseas. So I was back into diverse, and most of my work has been internationally as well. So I find that because of that diversity, people often have a wider perspective of what is normal, right? Um, Whereas a more homogeneous culture has a more narrow view of what normal is. But
Mhm.
it's kind of like what is it? What is it in English? The when the horses have the blinders, right? When you only see this is normal. But when your perspective is a little widened, that's also normal. Both can be true. Neither is wrong, but I think the wider your lens is, the more diverse your experience is, the more you can learn about yourself and from others too.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
whether whether it be the diversity, the neuro divergent diversity, or that cultural diversity.
Absolutely. And I think that I think we all become better as we start to learn and accept. And then also we see some things that have extreme value that
Hmm.
maybe aren't a part of us. And we should be able to kind of say, wow, look at this piece of this particular individual. That is amazing that they have this view, that they have this experience, that they have taken this shape. And it's just understanding some of that. But one thing that you had stated in the beginning, which I've heard a lot from very successful neurodivergent individuals, is finding their voice and being able to share their story and how powerful that's been. And it sounds like you initially found that through writing.
Hmm.
Um, what was that feeling? What was that experience? I mean, can you even describe what that outpour of, this is who I am, what that meant to you?
I I went through some really hard stuff from 2020 to 2023, like, and carried over into 2024 with the higher level of care. And I initially wanted that buried, my story buried, because there was a lot of, like, in my mind, I thought that there was a lot of stigma attached to it. Like there's that negative stigma of you know uh, suicide attempt survivors, right? And there's a stigma around being a man that underwent psychological abuse. That men don't typically talk about that
Hmm.
when that happens. But for a while, I felt like the silence was killing me softly too, right? And when I started dating, she was the complete opposite of what I walked out of. Like, and that initially made me suspicious, very suspicious, right? So when she got sick, it was my way of making a deal with God, right? Like, hey, I'm gonna tell her everything, but like, I'm gonna work through my stuff. so that we could do this together. Because if I'm gonna have anyone to support me, I'd love for it to be her.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started writing, and it was painful to write a lot of the stuff, because I had to do it at a coffee shop, because I felt like if I did it at home, I was gonna break apart.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was writing, it was not only terrifying but cathartic. And initially, I thought I felt a lot more comfortable writing then, because in my mind, the audience was always going to be one. It was always going to be Katie. And so I felt like I could be a lot more honest. There's only going to be one person hearing my story,
Mm-hmm.
until my sister started reading my work. And she's the one that convinced, after Katie passed away, she told me that, like, this your words can actually help people. Parents understand signs of autism in kids with a younger age, but it can help people that have seen their whole lives, and people that have been psychologically, just generally psychologically abused, and give them hope. And that was more terrifying than anything to me, because it went from an initial audience of one to potentially the entire planet,
Yeah.
right? And not I understand that not the entire planet's going to read my book, but, like, hey, the probability is a lot higher that more people than just one uh, are going to read my work. And then that fear dissipated this past December. After I published the book, I was preparing for a talk at the Duxbury Senior Center, which is a town next over. And so I was at the same coffee shop where I wrote it. I was with my dog, Shadow. These two kids, I call them kids, but they're in their 20s. They're not children. They were talking to me and about my book, and also wanting to pet my dog. Um, and this lady came up, and because she heard us talking, and she recognized me. She had bought my book at my book launch, and she was like, turns to them and said, this book helped me survive. And, like, to this day, whenever I recount, like, it's always like that defibrillator to my soul, because, like, I helped someone, and that's been so freeing, that I know I've helped. If one person helped, then there are many others. Like, my mom met someone on the train commuting to Boston, and um the lady keeps writing to my mom saying, I understand my son so much better now with autism, and how I miss the signs. And so it's like less terrifying, but a huge weight lifted off my shoulders at the same time.
But it's amazing how, I guess, being in a position where you're writing so honestly to a person that you trust and love so much, and those words being shared with more and more people, I think that I would imagine is that the honesty and the experience is what's driving people to open their eyes, to be able to kind of broaden their viewpoint and their ability to have compassion and to be able to take a step out of their own shadow and understand what's going on. But the fact that you did that and have touched so many other lives probably gives hope to a variety of different families and other neurodivergents that they're not alone, which I think is an important factor, is community. Did you experience that where, having the right group of people around you, having the right community takes away from that feeling of loneliness or feeling where you have to live within a mask?
Absolutely. And I have it now. It took me, um, I start, part of my rebuilding process was finding that community, right? And it started with something what I initially thought was so stupid, right? But I mean that lovingly. My sister put a paddle in my hand one day and said, "Go play pickleball." And I said, "I'm not gonna play pickleball." And months passed after she lent me her paddle, and I was done with work early, and I was waiting for Katie to finish her work so that we could go do something. This, mind you, it was 2 in the afternoon. I was done a couple hours early, so I went to the park and I started playing, and I became hooked because they didn't know me, but they were like roasting me, and then slowly as they found out more about me, it was like they became so supportive about everything. A lot of them came to this, like if I need anything, they're like right there.
Mm-hmm.
But also I got pointed to other resources like there's a autism support center here, so I could talk with other and spend time with people that are neurodiverse like me. I am part of the Association for Suicide Prevention, where I talk with other fellow survivors and we support each other that way. Um, and it that there's this. I'm sure you've heard this African saying that if you want to go fast, uh, go it alone. But if you want to go far, go with others.
Mm-hmm.
It is the watered down version is the way I remember it, but it's what's that community is what's been carrying me and catapulting me into uh, my healing journey, and
Mm-hmm.
the giving me the courage to share my story to a broad spectrum of people as well.
And that's a piece of advice that I feel like I'm hearing consistently is find that community, whether it's you don't have to be neurodiverse to need community. It's everybody
Right.
needs to find a community where they feel supported and where they can feel like they can come out of their shell and just be and be comfortable and be confident. And I think that that's a huge part of growth. I think it's a huge part of finding your place. But you talked about hope, I mean, and finding all these resources. But earlier, you also talked about your German Shepherd, and I know that in your writings and in your storytelling is that Shadow, your German Shepherd, has been a source of hope for you. How did that come together?
Oh, yeah, no. Um, I've had her since she was about 4 months old. I got her when I lived in Madagascar. She just seems to know. Like when I was going through or when I was experiencing psychological abuse, I I think she sensed that, and she would always just hang out with me and like make her presence known. The couple times she sat on my chest and you know sought help, like she was like barking, and but even after that, as when I walked out of that relationship, she helped me with the small wins every day, right? I I didn't know what to do or how to like make friends again because I felt like everything got stripped from me, right?
Mhm.
And well, she has needs. She had to go use the bathroom, and I was living in an apartment complex, and it started with, "Oh, cute dog," to the next day, "Can I say hi to your dog?" "Yeah." Uh, well, there's a few of us that walk in the mornings with our dogs. If you want to join us, um, to you know, I started like in months. Everyone knew Shadow and I. So like even if I was just walking to my car, everyone would be like, "Hey, Chris." So it's like she started helping me get out and meet people um and or go to the woods because she loves hiking, and it's one of the places where I find absolute peace is when I'm hiking. So like through that, I think she also helped with a lot of my healing with just having me meet people. If it wasn't for Shadow, I wouldn't have met Katie, right?
Mhm.
Um, and um, so so yeah, she's been my guardian for a long time.
I think it's funny is those relationships, and I mean whether it's with a person and a very important animal in their life, or two different people, it's the ability to care for one another that I think is so powerful. Is that I'm sure Shadow knows how much you care for him, and I think that is reciprocated in the relationship that you get directly from Shadow, and I think that's just it's symbolic all the stories that you put together about trying to be able to understand acceptance, how to be able to really be your true self, how to be able to take care of one another, how to find community. All that seems to go together, and I think that this picture of your relationship with Shadow brings together a lot of those pieces. So you've written your memoir, and just to kind of remind our audience is that it's called Now That I'm Still Here. But what's next? I mean, what's next on your journey? Are you out there sharing your story? Are you having any sort of tours where people can ask questions that have read your memoir and get deeper into what it is that you've put out there?
I know I really enjoy the writing process. I don't know if I have another book in me. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. But uh, I I write a lot on Substack and a wide range of things, like you know grief, or growing up autistic, or growing up as a third culture kid. And I talk about abuse and trauma, and kind of chronicling my healing journey, because my message is always this: like, you can go through some stuff, but my biggest pet peeve is that it gets packaged as this linear package of, you do this and this, then you're going to be great. But they don't tell you. I mean, they're in theory they're right. If you do these steps, you will get better. But they don't tell you it's not a straight line. So I talk a lot about that. And so that's one way I share my story. I do some book tours. I'm really shy when it comes to like public speaking. So I started this podcasting scene so that I could get out there, because I know there are thousands of listeners out there, but I'm only talking to one person. It's that weird Jedi mind trick.
I live
So
that same life, Chris. And that's how I feel too. It's so much easier just to have a conversation than it is to have a room full of people where it's almost like you're being analyzed as you're chatting. So I totally feel that.
yeah, and I want to connect with others, right? In terms of, if there's anyone out there that is struggling, or just needs an ear. Like, I'm not a psychologist. The best I can provide is an ear, right? And maybe a shoulder to lean on. But or if people have questions, like, I would love to, you know, people reach out on like Substack or Facebook and be like, hey, can we chat? And I would love to connect with people on that intimate level.
hmm
So that's one way people can contact me. But up until I get the courage to have more public speaking um, gravitas, then you know that's I'm getting there. I used to be so shy with these I still am shy with the podcast, even if it's one on one. But um, yeah,
Well, I mean,
that's
it's a digital world now, though. So at least, I mean, we have all these forums, we have all these opportunities to share our stories, and um, putting shyness aside, I think that just the fact that you were able to come on and share your experiences today is going to be so valuable to so many people. I know for me, it's a chance to learn. It's a chance to be able to have more opportunity for understanding and to have better perspective of what others are experiencing in the same world I live. And it's just getting that whole picture. But we will definitely provide some links to the Substack, the Facebook, and how to be able to find your memoir. But thank you so much for coming on to our podcast today, Chris, and sharing your story.
and thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.